The letter arrived on a Tuesday, thin and official-looking, buried between a water bill and a pizza coupon. Cole Brennan almost threw it away. Estate of Ezra Brennan, Pinnacle Ridge, Colorado. Property transfer pending. He read it 3 times, standing in his driveway in Dayton, grease still under his fingernails from a transmission job. His grandfather was dead. The old man who'd taught him to fish, who'd sent hand-carved wooden figures every Christmas, who'd promised that someday Cole would understand why the mountains mattered, gone at 87. Quietly, in a cabin nobody had visited in 11 years. Cole drove to Colorado the following weekend. Pinnacle Ridge wasn't what he expected. The 2-lane road climbing into the Rockies gave way to a gatehouse, an actual gatehouse, with a uniformed attendant and a retractable barrier, and beyond it spread hundreds of enormous homes, pale stone and dark timber, manicured lawns, somehow green against the September mountain air. A sign read, Pinnacle Ridge HOA, a premier mountain community. His grandfather's cabin sat at the edge of it, all like a stone left behind by a glacier. Weathered cedar siding, a sagging porch, pine trees pressing close on 3 sides. Cole stood on the steps and felt something loosen in his chest. The place smelled like wood smoke and old wool. Ezra's fishing rod still leaned in the corner. He'd been there 40 minutes when the black SUV pulled up. The woman who stepped out wore pressed khakis and a polo shirt, with a small gold P embroidered on the chest. She was perhaps 60, silver-haired, with the particular confidence of someone accustomed to compliance. "You must be the grandson." She didn't offer her hand. "Brenda Walsh, HOA president. I'll be brief. This property is in violation of 17 separate covenant codes. The structure is unsightly. The lot is overgrown and, frankly, it brings down the entire community's property values. The HOA expects you to either renovate to our standards or sell within 90 days. Cole looked at her for a long moment. "My grandfather lived here for 40 years. "Your grandfather had an arrangement," she said, clipping the words. "Things have changed." She handed him a thick envelope of documents and left. That night, Cole sat at Ezra's kitchen table reading every page. Covenant violations, mandatory aesthetic standards, minimum renovation costs that would require a second mortgage. At the bottom, a purchase offer, $340,000 for the cabin and its 2-acre lot, signed by a development company, whose registered agent was listed as Brenda L. Walsh. He almost missed it, but something his grandfather used to say surfaced in his memory. "Boy, always read to the last page. That's where they hide the truth." He kept reading. The Pinnacle Ridge Public Library was a single room attached to the town hall in the valley below the ridge. The librarian, a retired school teacher named Dolores, watched Cole spread out deed records and county survey maps across the reading table without comment, then quietly brought him coffee. What he found took 3 days to fully understand. In 1952, his grandfather, Ezra Brennan, a surveyor by trade, had purchased 1 to 300 acres of mountain land for $4,200. The deed was clear, the boundaries surveyed by Ezra himself. He'd built the cabin the following year. For decades, the land sat largely untouched. Ezra was a man of modest needs. In 1987, a development company called Pinnacle Properties LLC had approached Ezra with a lease agreement. They would develop 200 acres of the land into a residential community. Ezra would receive annual lease payments and retain ownership of his cabin and surrounding 2 acres. The lease contained one critical clause, buried in paragraph 19 of the original 31-page contract. Failure to remit annual payments for 3 consecutive years shall trigger automatic reversion of all developed property to the original landowner. Payments had been made regularly through 1999. Then Cole found something that made his hands go still. The payment records in the county file showed continuous payments, but when he cross-referenced them with his grandfather's personal bank records found in a shoebox under the cabin's floorboards, the deposits stopped in 2001. Someone had continued filing payment records with the county. Someone had forged them. He photographed everything. Brenda Walsh's campaign against him escalated steadily. HOA inspectors appeared at the cabin every other day, issuing new violation notices. Someone filed an anonymous complaint claiming the cabin was structurally unsafe. triggering a county inspection. The inspector arrived, walked the perimeter looking slightly embarrassed, and found nothing actionable. Then came the letter from a law firm in Denver, 17 pages asserting that the cabin's original deed had been improperly recorded and that the 2-acre lot technically fell within HOA jurisdiction, subject to mandatory covenant compliance or forced sale proceedings. Cole was in over his head legally. He knew it. He drove to a small law office in Ridgeway, where a property attorney named Marcus Teller had a reputation for not backing down from powerful clients. Teller read the documents twice, then looked up over his glasses. "Where did you get these lease records?" "County archive and my grandfather's personal files." "And you believe the county records were falsified?" "I know they were. The handwriting on the later payment confirmations doesn't match the originals, and the bank deposits don't exist." Teller was quiet for a long time. "Cole, if this reversion clause is valid, and I believe it is, and if those payments were fraudulently recorded, then your family's ownership of this land never legally lapsed." He set the papers down carefully. "You don't own 2 acres on Pinnacle Ridge. You own all 1,200 of them. Every house up there was built on land that still belongs to the Brennan family." The room felt very still. A journalist named Priya Anand had been covering HOA disputes across the western slope for a regional paper. She drove up to meet Cole at the diner below the ridge on a Thursday morning, ordered black coffee, and listened without interruption for 90 minutes. "Can you prove the forgeries?" she asked. A forensic document examiner Teller hired confirmed it last week. The ink composition on 12 of the payment confirmations postdates the paper by at least 15 years. "And the money?" "The actual lease payments that were supposed to go to your grandfather. Still tracing it. But Brenda Walsh has been HOA president since 2003. The HOA collected maintenance fees from 847 homes at rates between $1,200 and $1,800 annually." He paused. "Teller thinks the lease payments were simply absorbed into HOA operating funds and reported as internal revenue." Priya wrote steadily in her notebook. "I have a contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division in Denver," she said. "This is bigger than a property dispute." The town hall meeting was Brenda's idea, which in retrospect was her final miscalculation. She called it to address what she described in the HOA newsletter as outside agitators, attempting to destabilize our community. She expected to control the room the way she always had, with confidence, social pressure, and the unspoken threat of covenant enforcement. The meeting room in the Pinnacle Ridge clubhouse held 400 people. It was standing room only. Cole sat in the third row with Marcus Teller on one side and Priya Anand on the other. 2 men in suits from the FBI's Denver field office stood near the back wall. Brenda opened with prepared remarks about property values, community integrity, and harassment from opportunistic outsiders. She was composed, practiced, fluent. Several residents nodded along. When she opened the floor, Cole stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He'd learned that from Ezra. Quiet men make people lean in to listen. He walked the room through the original 1952 deed, the lease agreement, the reversion clause. He displayed the forged payment records alongside his grandfather's actual bank. Statements on a projector screen borrowed from the library. He showed the forensic report. He showed the gap. 23 years of fraudulent documentation. 847 homes built on land that the Brennan family had never legally transferred. The room went from restless to silent to something close to stunned. "Under Colorado property law," Marcus Teller said, stepping forward, "and the explicit terms of the original lease agreement, ownership of all 1,200 acres reverted to the Brennan estate in 2004, 3 years after the last verified payment. Every home on Pinnacle Ridge sits on land that belongs to Cole Brennan." The room erupted. Brenda Walsh stood at the podium with an expression Cole would remember for the rest of his life. not guilt, not remorse, but the particular fury of someone watching power slip through their fingers. She began speaking loudly about fraudulent claims and legal harassment and community protection. She was still speaking when the two FBI agents moved through the crowd and one of them said her name. She was arrested on 6 counts of wire fraud, document forgery, and fiduciary theft. She went quietly, which surprised everyone. Cole could have done many things with what he now legally owned. He spent 3 weeks meeting individually with homeowners' representatives. Most of them had no idea. They'd bought their homes in good faith, taken out mortgages, raised children, planted gardens. They were as much victims as anyone. He offered every homeowner a fair purchase agreement below market value, with extended payment terms and no interest for the first 5 years. The land under their homes, sold properly, documented clearly, recorded honestly. 81% accepted within 60 days. The remainder negotiated. Cole's terms were consistent and generous. Not one family was displaced. The HOA was dissolved by court order. In its place, residents formed a community board with elected representation and publicly audited finances. With the proceeds, Cole established 2 things in his grandfather's name. The first was a scholarship fund for first-generation college students in rural Colorado. Ezra Brennan had been the first in his family to attend a university, working nights to pay for it. The second was a land trust protecting the remaining 100 acres of pine forest that Ezra had never leased, never sold, never touched. It would stay wild. Cole kept the cabin. He replaced 3 rotted porch boards, re-chinked the logs where the weather had gotten in, and rehung the fishing rods on their proper pegs. On clear evenings, he sat on the steps and watched the light leave the peaks. His grandfather had bought this land with a surveyor's eye and a working man's savings, and had trusted that paper and ink and recorded truth would protect what he'd built. Someone had stolen that trust for decades, but the document trail Ezra left behind, meticulous, precise, the work of a man who understood that land doesn't lie, had outlasted the people who tried to erase it. Cole poured his coffee and watched the stars come out over the ridge. Some things, the old man used to say, just need time to come right. He'd been correct, as usual.